Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshulamanitandjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravajantam Manupitya Apitya Krityam Apino Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmayataya Tadavo Binedus Tam Savabhutam Hridayam Unimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatam Vyasam Tito Jayamudirayat Bhaktya Vihina Parada Lakshay Kiptashtakamari Tarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanda Vrinde Namaste Charanara Vendam Tave Vasmi Najivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanandike Vancha Kalpa Tarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so we're going to continue here, and we're going to first offer our most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus, unto Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalila Bhavishta Om Vishnupada Tarsat Sri Srimad Abhaya Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada and Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalila Bhavishta Om Vishnupada Tarsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Raj, unto our exalted Rupanuga Guru Varga, to all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So, a little distracted here. Shouldn't be. So we're going to continue hearing the beautiful Chaitanya Charitamrita. I have posted now the schedule for the audio parikram beginning on Wednesday with Sankalpa, taking a vow, and do this Manasi, go down to the Ganga. And then Thursday, Friday, and onward, we'll be doing the parikram following the schedule of the IGVT party, right? There's two different major parties that we have going out. So I'm posting that. I'm not sure when I will start. Chaitanya Maharaj is going to be first, right, for an hour, and then I follow in the second. So he'll probably start at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, because there'll be some kirtan before that. All right, so we left off with Mahaprabhu and the Kazi meeting together. And we always offer our obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev, all the assembled Vaishnavas, Vaishnavis, Jai, Jai, Jai. So, just to back up a little bit, remember the context. Nilambar, the Kazi, was talking to Mahaprabhu. He was quite worried and understandably afraid because of the giant kirtan party, and the many in the kirtan party were quite angry and were somewhat violent, destroying his gardens and going into the house. But when he was called down by Mahaprabhu, who was sitting very peacefully, he said that your uncle on your mother's side, your grandfather on your mother's side, is Nilambar Chakravarti, and I also have a relationship with him, so that you are my nephew in our village relationship. And when a nephew is very angry, his maternal uncle is tolerant. And when the maternal uncle commits an offense, the nephew does not take it very seriously. So he's trying to calm things down a bit. In this way, the Kazi and the Lord talked with each other with various indications, but no outsider could understand the inner meaning of their conversation. This is Mahaprabhu's nature, right? Speaking, and this is actually a Vedic art. And this is the nature of the talks between Krishna and the gopis. They might say one thing which appears to be very simple and obvious on the outside, but underneath, undertones of very deep meaning. So the Lord said, "My dear uncle, I have come to your home just to ask you some questions." "Yes," the Kazi replied. "You are welcome." Oh, wait, let me see. Is that right? Make this a little bigger. Okay. Ask you some questions. And yes, the Kazi replied, "You are welcome. Just tell me what is in your mind." The Lord said, "You drink cow's milk. Therefore the cow is your mother. And the bull produces grains for your maintenance. Therefore he is your father. Since the bull and cow are your father and mother, how can you kill and eat them? What kind of religious principle is this? On what strength are you so daring that you commit such sinful activities?" You know, in the West, when you heard that, you think, what is that sentimental idea? But you can understand that in India, at that time also, because the higher class of people were educated about the nature of the soul, that these are not just beasts. They are living souls, non-different from us, just embodied differently. And their role, designed by the Lord, was that the bull and the cow, they would be very instrumental in helping to maintain and protect humanity by plowing the field, pulling carts, providing milk, right? Medicine from cow urine, cow dung for fertilizing. So many things come from them. And so recognizing their contribution, they're seen just like a mother. A mother gives milk, right? And they're nourishing and nurturing, and so they should be protected. And the cow also in the same way. And in a deeper way, they represented genuinely religious principles. And when you drink pure cow milk, it helps create a refined brain and intelligence, which is necessary for understanding subtle subject matter, and also nourishes and makes you very strong. So, he said, since the bull and the cow are your father and mother, how can you kill and eat them? What kind of religious principle is this? On what strength are you so daring that you commit such sinful activities? Probably the Kazi had never contemplated that. Srila Prabhupada says, everyone can understand that we drink the milk of cows and take the help of bulls in producing agricultural products. Therefore, since our real father gives us food grains, and our mother gives us milk with which to live, the cow and bull are considered our father and mother. According to Vedic civilization, there are 7 mothers, of which the cow is one. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu challenged the Muslim Kazi. What kind of religious principle do you follow by killing your father and mother to eat them? In any civilized human society, no one would dare kill his father and mother for the purpose of eating them. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu challenged the system of Muslim religion as patricide and matricide. That's, killing father, killing mother. In the Christian religion, also a principal commandment is, thou shalt not kill. Nevertheless, Christians violate this rule. They are very expert in killing and in opening slaughterhouses. In our Krishna consciousness movement, our first provision is that no one should be allowed to eat any kind of flesh. It does not matter whether it is cow's flesh or goat's flesh, but we especially stress the prohibition against cow's flesh, because according to the Shastra, the cow is our mother. Thus, the Muslims' cow killing was challenged by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as he was challenging the religious understanding of the Kazi and the Quran, Srila Prabhupada introduces the challenge to the Christians, the beginning of the Ten Commandments. Of course, nowadays, when you listen to religious scholars argue that, that's one of the main ones, because some vegetarians say, oh, it's in the Bible, thou shalt not kill, but then, or when they're talking about soldiers or the death penalty, and they're always trying to finesse the original language of that commandment to compensate or rationalize, right, their decisions to eat meat. And ultimately, because they don't have higher knowledge of the non-difference of the soul in the cow and the human being, and by generations and generations of eating meat, the quality of compassion is almost nil, right? There's no sensitivity to the suffering of animals, whether they're fishing for them and then pulling them out of the water and then just allowing them to flap and die slowly, or whether they're putting them in boiling water while they're alive, or whatever it is. There's just no sensitivity anymore. People are not sensitive. They're cold. So the Kazi is going to reply. He says, as you have your scriptures called the Vedas and Puranas, we have our scripture known as the Holy Quran. Purport. Chand Kazi agreed to talk with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the strength of the scriptures. According to the Vedic scripture, if one can support his position by quoting from the Veda, his argument is perfect. Similarly, when the Muslims support their position with quotations from the Quran, their arguments are also authorized. When Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu raised the question of Muslims' cow killing and bull killing, Chand Kazi came to the standard of understanding from his scripture. And he says, according to the Quran, there are two ways of advancement: through increasing the propensity to enjoy and through decreasing the propensity to enjoy. On the path of decreasing attachment, nivritti marg, the killing of animals is prohibited. That's very interesting, this idea of increasing the propensity to enjoy. There are many modern pseudo-religious philosophies that establish that. I remember back in the day, I think they're still going on. Now it's called OSHA. But back then it was, what was the guy's name? Anyway, they were situated in Pune originally, and they had this gigantic international movement. They ended up in Oregon also. Rajneesh. And he promoted the idea, which was very popular among Western centralist so-called yogi types, that the path to detachment is to enjoy without restriction now, right? Just get it all out of your system. Enjoy as much as you want, whenever you want. And their organization was basically they'd have these big so-called kirtan dance parties, and then everybody could just go and hook up indiscriminately, right? And people were given the title sannyasi, men and women, but with it came no restrictive prohibition, right? Just enjoy. And then by that, then you'll see that, oh, there's nothing to it, and you'll renounce. But actually that really doesn't work, because when you enjoy like that, you are sowing more seeds of enjoyment. Every time you do any activity in the material world, it creates a seed. At first, the seed is dormant and resting in the mind, and gradually, over time, some seeds sprout very quickly and become desires and then the impulse to action. Some lie dormant, sometimes for lifetimes and lifetimes. But whatever activity you perform, the seed is planted. And so it's like throwing, Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Radhaman Juki Jai. Jai Shrimati Lalita, Shrimati Vishaka, Shri Rupa Manjari, Shri Bhakti Manjari Ki Jai. Use a little light here. And Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Let's let everybody see them. Okay. There we are. Oh, there's Srila Prabhupada. There's Bhakti Manjari, Vishaka Devi. There's Shri Radha Radharaman. There's Shrimati Lalita, Shri Rupa Manjari. There's Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami. And there's Deva Vrat offering obeisance. Okay. Back we go. So, so this idea of, we also have Pravriti Marg and Nivritti Marg, but Pravriti Marg doesn't mean increasing the propensity to enjoy. It means regulating it, right? There are concessions made. Certainly in household life, family life, opportunities are there. But the positive activities are not meant to just, they're not descriptions of increasing material enjoyment. It means positive actions in engaging in bhakti. So he goes on to say, let me read that verse again. His understanding, according to the Quran, there are two ways of advancement: through increasing the propensity to enjoy and through decreasing the propensity to enjoy. On the path of decreasing attachment, Nivritti Marg, the killing of animals is prohibited. In the Bengali verse, they say, Sehi Shastra Kohe Pravriti Nivritti Marga Beda, right? So they use those terms, but they have a different conception. So he goes on to say, on the path of material activities, there is regulation for killing cows. If such killing is done under the guidance of Scripture, there is no sin. Judaic tradition also has that now. Since the time of Abraham, I believe, when the covenant was kind of redesigned, they interpreted that now we can also sacrifice cow. But they have a special so-called way of making it pure, which they call kosher, which means that you bleed the animal completely first, and that's how you kill it, so that the impure blood is not in the meat. But what a horrific way to torture some animal to death. And you're still eating the flesh, and it's just bizarre. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada says, the word Shastra is derived from the dhatu, or verbal root, shas. Shas dhatu pertains to controlling or ruling. A government's ruling through force or weapons is called Shastra. Thus, whenever there is ruling, either by weapons or by injunctions, the Shash Dhatu is the basic principle. Between Shastra, that is ruling through weapons, one is Shastra. Shastra is ruling through weapons, and Shastra is ruling through the injunctions of the scriptures. Shastra and Shastra, long A, short A, right? The better is Shastra, right? Scriptural. Our Vedic scriptures are not ordinary law books of human common sense. They are statements of factually liberated persons unaffected by the imperfections of the senses. Right, and when people who are conditioned by material nature and have imperfect material senses, and of course are filled with material aspiration and desire, they will see through the lens of that desire, and many of the scriptural codes, which are not aligned with modern mores, social rules and regulations that permit and encourage unrestricted sense gratification, they find fault with it. But the intent of the Shastras, written at a time for people living and pursuing a life of purification and perfection, that's when these were written. And they seem out of step with modern society. Indeed, they are. But which one is correct, right? So, It takes some time. I mean, even now, devotees argue because in Srila Prabhupada's purports in Bhagavad Gita and other places, he says things which don't align with the mood or mentality or current flavor of material society. He says things about women, for instance, in a way that people can't understand or appreciate. And they want to edit these things out of his books to make them more palatable to modern people. But that's not the idea. Srila Prabhupada's speaking the opinion of acharyas. If people can't grasp it, it's our idea to explain. Like there's some things which he uses which make people go, what? Because he's using these words in a very different context. I don't think I'm going to go off on that path right now, maybe another time. But he's saying that Shastra must be correct always, not sometimes correct and sometimes incorrect. In the Vedic scriptures, the cow is described as a mother. Therefore, she is a mother for all time. It is not, as some rascals say, that in the Vedic age she was a mother, but not in this age. If Shastra is an authority, the cow is a mother always. She was a mother in the Vedic age, and she is a mother in this age also. And cows are so nice. Anyone who takes care of cows becomes very peaceful. People that are cowherds are very nice people generally, you know. If one acts according to the injunctions of Shastra, he is freed from the reactions of sinful activity. For example, the propensities for eating flesh, drinking wine, and enjoying sex are all natural to the conditioned soul. The path of such enjoyment is called pravritti marg. The Shastra says, pravrittir esha bhutanam nivrittistu mahapala. One should not be carried away by the propensities of defective conditioned life. One should be guided by the principles of the Shastras. A child's propensity is to play all day long. But it is the injunction of the Shastra that the parents should take care to educate him. The Shastras are there just to guide the activities of human society. But because people do not refer to the injunctions of Shastras, which are free from defects and imperfections, they are therefore misguided by so-called educated teachers and leaders who are full of the deficiencies of conditioned life. That's the battle that's going on now in America, or all over the world, but I'm particularly aware of what's going on in America. The so-called teachers are abandoning reality and teaching conceptions which defy not only Shastra, but basic science, and just support the complete manipulation and degradation of modern society, abandoning the reality, biological differences between male and female. Also, therefore, the inherent propensities of male and female, which are understood properly, define roles in society which are beneficial for both. By trying to break down these natural propensities and defy and ignore them, they're actually creating a chaotic society where men are becoming like women, very feminine, and women are becoming like men, very masculine, and there's no harmony in the relationships anymore, just strife and competition, and so society's not being built up anymore. The tradition and the codes, for instance, sacred binding of marriage, for instance, is completely, even though it's a natural propensity for people, nowadays it's minimized in its importance, and the purpose of it is also changed. It used to be a social contract, a familial contract, not just between two people, but between families and villages and society and God. And there are certain responsibilities, and people who understood it in that way had a much deeper commitment and got a much different sense of value. Even when things were hard and they had to struggle, by thinking that, oh, we're doing this properly, this is a covenant with God, a covenant with our family, a covenant with our society, they would gain a certain strength and satisfaction from maintaining that vow and that tradition. And children raised by parents with this kind of discipline and commitment towards them also had that kind of value system instilled in them. And so society as a whole was much stronger, much more regulated, much more aligned with law, not just social law, but spiritual law. So everyone's much happier. And so, but as a learned scholar, the Kazi challenged Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In your Vedic scripture, there is an injunction for killing a cow. On the strength of this injunction, great sages performed sacrifice involving cow killing. There were sacrifices like that. But what was the context? Refuting the Kazi's statement, the Lord immediately replied, the Vedas clearly enjoin that cows should not be killed. Therefore, every Hindu, whoever he may be, avoids indulging in cow killing. Srila Prabhupada explains. In the Vedic scriptures, there are concessions for meat eaters. It is said that if one wants to eat meat, he should kill a goat before the goddess Kali and then eat its meat. Meat eaters are not allowed to purchase meat or flesh from a market or a slaughterhouse. In Bhaktivinoda Thakur's self-narrated biography that he sent to his son, Lalit Prasad, he describes his childhood when he grew up in a village that was largely Shaktas. Half of his family was Shaktas. And he described these ceremonies that would take place sometimes during the year when the goddess would be worshipped and goats and chickens and all would be sacrificed. And he said, and many Brahmins come for this. And he said, but they come really not for religious principles. They just want to eat goat and chickens and stuff. It's Bengal, very, very common. But they weren't having slaughterhouses. They would eat the animals during these so-called religious ceremonies, right? So there are no sanctions for maintaining regular slaughterhouses to satisfy the tongues of meat eaters. It always had to be done by injunction, right? Even a Kshatriya who would go in the forest and kill vicious animals and others to maintain balance in the forest, they would bring them back and there would be a ceremony, a yajna, for the benefit of the animal, and so that the hide could be taken and used for drums, shoes, whatever, deerskin mats for yogis and all. And that kind of meat could be eaten by low-class people if they wanted. So as far as cow killing is concerned, it is completely forbidden. Since the cow is considered a mother, how could the Vedas allow cow killing? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out that the Kazi's statement was faulty. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a clear injunction that cows should be protected, 1844. Krishi Gorakshavanijam Vaishya Karma Svabhavajam. The duty of Vaishyas is to produce agricultural products, trade, and give protection to cows. Therefore, it is a false statement that the Vedic scriptures contain injunctions permitting cow killing. And the Mahaprabhu goes on, in the Vedas and Puranas, there are injunctions declaring that if one can revive a living being, one can kill it for experimental purposes. Therefore, the great sages sometimes killed old cows, and by chanting Vedic hymns, they brought them back to life for perfection. The killing and rejuvenation of such old and invalid cows was not truly killing, but an act of great benefit. It also proved the efficacy of the mantras that they were chanting in the larger sacrifice, because the sacrifice was done for another intention, another purpose, and then part of it would be the sacrifice of an animal, like an old cow or horse. Horse, we hear about that, right? Horse sacrifice. But the animal was brought back to life, and by that you could see, oh, these brahmanas are qualified. They have that power. If they couldn't, then they weren't qualified to perform the yajna in the first place. So he said, formerly, Mahaprabhu says, there were powerful brahmanas who could make such experiments using Vedic hymns. But now, because of the Kali Yuga, brahmanas are not so powerful. Therefore, the killing of cows and bulls for rejuvenation is forbidden, right? Forbidden, verboten. In this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden. The offering of a horse in sacrifice, same reasons. The offering of a cow in sacrifice. The acceptance of the order of sannyas. The offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers. And a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. So, formerly, if the brother perhaps was impotent or died, his brother could impregnate the wife so she could have children and that line would go on. Not in Kali Yuga. And the idea when it says no sannyas, it means karma sannyas and mayavad sannyas, not the sannyas that Mahaprabhu instituted.
What was the fourth one?
Flesh to the forefathers. When you do shraddha, sometimes forefathers were offered flesh.
No.
But Kali Yuga, the propensity is so degraded, we're going to remove ourselves. Also, since you Muslims cannot bring killed cows back to life, you are responsible for killing them. Therefore, you are going to hell. There is no way for your deliverance. And Kali Yuga is so powerful that India, under the British, there was so much sanction for cow killing. The Hindus couldn't prevent it. And when they gained independence, that tradition continued. But in recent times, with the revival, there's been a revival of belief and appreciation of Hindu or Vedic principles. They have restricted cow slaughter. There are places where it goes on, I think, but it's very, very restricted. I'm not sure, I haven't been there in a few years, so I'm not sure if they eliminated it completely. But when I was there, it was restricted to some states, like Kerala and South India, which was so largely Christian, and Muslim states. And they would steal cows from places and take them in trucks to these other places. And it was so barbaric, these people are so cruel. They would herd these cows that they stole and put them into trucks, and then they would break their legs in order to get them so they could fit more of them in there, so the cows would have to collapse and they could load more on top of each other. Did heinous things. And they would just drive them for days in these trucks like that, covered over so you couldn't see them. But in Tamil Nadu, they began to, what was it, the VJP? Vishva? Anyway, there was a Hindu organization, kind of a militant organization, VSP, VP, Vishva, I can't remember the name. Anyway, they went out like vigilantes and would pull these trucks over. They'd identify them, pull them over, rescue the cows, if they were rescuable, and beat the drivers and burn the trucks, sending a message, right? This will not go on anymore. So cow killers are condemned to rot in hellish life for as many thousands of years as there are hairs on the body of a cow. That's pretty heavy. Every cow that you eat, partake in eating, that's how many years you have to suffer, the hair on all those cows. There are many mistakes and illusions in your scriptures. Their compilers, not knowing the essence of religion, gave orders that were against reason and argument. So Mahaprabhu is not accepting the Quran on the level of the Vedas, just like the Bible and the Old Testament. They're not on the level. They have injunctions. They have ideas which point to the Vedic conclusion, and to the degree that they do, that's acceptable. But they don't have the same depth of knowledge, not even close. After hearing these statements by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Kazi, his arguments stunned, could not put forward any more words. Thus, after due consideration, the Kazi accepted defeat and spoke as follows. Obviously, this is abbreviated. They had a long conversation. He's giving the essence of it. Perhaps in the Bhagavatam, in the next Kali Yuga, when all of this is presented in detail, maybe all of that will be there. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about this verse. In our practical preaching work, we meet many Christians who talk about statements of the Bible. When we question whether God is limited or unlimited, Christian priests say that God is unlimited. But when we question why the unlimited God should have only one son and not unlimited sons, they're unable to answer. Similarly, from a scientific point of view, the answers of the Old Testament, New Testament, and Quran to many questions have changed. But a Shastra cannot change at a person's whim. All Shastras must be free from the four defects of human nature. The statements of Shastras must be correct for all time. So in the beginning, when Christianity was forming, there were many major schools of it, right? And there are great debates, because there were many writings about Jesus, many writings from the Old Testament, and they had to rationalize and determine what to use and what not to use. So there's Orthodox Christianity, there's Roman Catholics, there's Eastern Orthodox, now there's Protestants, there are many different divisions, and they have different ideas about which texts are genuine, which are not, which should be used, which are not. The Ethiopian texts are different. And basically they just sat down in committee and decided for our group, this is what we believe and what we're going to accept. And that propensity done by conditioned souls can produce no complete and pure version, because they don't know. They don't know. And interestingly enough, in our own ISKCON, a microcosm of that transition that took place over a number, hundreds of years in Christian religion, has taken place within 50 or 60 years. Many different groups forming with different philosophies, arguing not from the words of previous acharyas, but arguing from their own interest groups, right? And they attempt to interpret the scripture in different ways, using logic and reason. But so many times I see where they really fail to refer to genuine acharyas and the genuine underlying principles of scripture. Oftentimes it's determined by, what is socially acceptable? What will work best now according to what people in this country believe, or their traditions in that country, rather than adhering to universal principles and establishing those by Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. Conditioned souls just argue amongst themselves and pick and choose what they want to believe and what they want to apply. That's why they're having so much difficulty right now, editing Srila Prabhupada's books. Should women be gurus or not? So many different subject matters. But when I see the arguments, I don't see them, so much with a really deep probe of Shastra and tradition. I see people picking and choosing what they want. Oh, Prabhupada said this. Oh, Prabhupada said that, right? But without correlating those three principles. Anyway, that's another thing. So, now Nimai said, your scripture, it's not really good. I mean, actually, if you look at the history of the Quran and how it's compiled, the ones who wrote it weren't living when Muhammad was around anyway. The ones who actually compiled it, they wrote what they heard from somebody else. The New Testament the four Gospels, okay, these persons were there during the time of Jesus, but what did they really understand? How much could they grasp? Right? And Jesus said, I have so much to tell you, but you cannot bear to hear it now. He understood that. At any rate, the Kazi responds, my dear Nimai Pandit, what you have said is all true. Our scriptures have developed only recently, and they are certainly not logical and philosophical. Whew, that's a heavy statement. My goodness. Srila Prabhupada's going to give a big purport on this. I think this subject matter, this is a good place to leave off because Srila Prabhupada's going to talk about what makes a scripture valid and where scripture can become errant, how and why. Yeah, so we'll do that all together starting tomorrow. So, offering obeisance to Srila Prabhupada, to Srila Gurudev, to all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. And we'll stop here. And starting Wednesday, we're going to start going on virtual parikram. Wednesday we'll be going down to the Ganga and doing vows, sankalpa, niyam seva, talking about parikram in general, and then day by day, following the parikram party as they go to these different places and then discussing them. Okay. Gaur Premanande, Haribol, Haribol.